Hello again and welcome back to our course on Project 2019. In this section, I'm going to look in a little bit more detail at tables. Now, we've used tables before. I've switched between tables a few times already in the course, and much of what you need to know you will have picked up from what we've done earlier on. But there are a few specific things I need to point out. Now, the first thing to point out is that a table is really just a collection of pieces of information about either a task or a resource. The tables in Project 2019 are divided into task tables and resource tables. Task tables contain information about tasks, and I'm pretty sure you can guess what resource tables contain. Now, there are several different task tables, and if we go back to the View tab and click on the Tables drop-down, the ones you can see in the list here are perceived as the most commonly used ones. So we have cost table, entry, hyperlink schedule, so on and so forth. So there's about 8 or 9 of them in there. But there is a full list of tables, and it's actually quite a long list. So let's go back to the entry table and click on Apply. Now, in order to tell you a little bit more about tables, what I'm going to do here is to drag the chart parts right off to the right. So I'm going to grab this middle bar and drag it all the way across, which gives us a little bit more room, as we're going to talk about the columns in this table. Now, the task entry table and many of the tables is just a combination of different columns. And of course, as you would expect, you can customize what columns you see in your view. So if I wanted to insert a column, say between the start and finish columns, if I just select finish, right click and select insert column, I then can see all the different field names that I could use for this column header, and there are lots and lots in there. As I've said before, they're all in alphabetical order, so that makes them a little bit easier to find, and you can see all of the baseline ones that we have in there. Now, I'm just going to hark back to something that we did earlier, and I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to select Finish Slack. So that gives me a column with the Slack information in it. So nice and easy to insert a column. Now, apart from inserting the column in the way that I just showed you between a couple of existing columns, or I should say more specifically to the left of an existing column, you also have this column at the end where it says Add New Column. So let's click the drop down and we get that same long list of fields. So let's choose on this occasion, I'm going to scroll down and select Critical. And that's now in the rightmost column. And you'll see that now I've done that, what Project 2019 does is it gives me another Add New Column on the end. Now, one thing you may find very useful with tables is to be able to format them a little bit more comprehensively. And this is particularly useful when you're doing presentations, possibly when you're printing out something like a Gantt chart and you want to make the information look smart and informative. So if you right-click on the head of one of the columns, you'll see an option there for Field Settings, and that brings up the Field Settings dialog. Now, in the Field Settings dialog, you can set or change quite a few things. So the first drop-down list here, Field Name, lets you choose the field name that's shown. And again, this is a very, very long list. So I'm going to stick with Finish. Now, the title area, I could choose to call this field something completely different. So if I wanted to call it Task Finish Date, I could do that by just typing it into the title box. So it doesn't essentially change the field name underneath, it just really changes that display name that you have. I'm not going to do that in this case, we're going to leave it as Finish. I could also say how I'd like that title aligned, so center, left or right. And also how I would like the data aligned. So let's change the data alignment from right to center. And let's make the column a little bit wider. So currently it's set to 16 units. So let's make that 20. And where the header text is too long to fit, if I have this box checked, that will then wrap the text. And let's click on OK. So you can see now there's been a significant change to the formatting of that particular column. Everything is aligned to the center and our column is slightly wider than the ones next to it. If you look at finish, slack, start and work, you can definitely see that finish is slightly wider because we set it to 20 units. So let me right click on it again and we go back to field settings. So if I'd made it obviously too small and I had header text wrapping not set, then I would lose part of that header text. The other thing you can do in here is select best fit, and it will set the width to fit all of the data that's currently in that column. And there we go. Now there are various other ways that you can customize the appearance. You can format the columns. If you go up to the Gantt chart tools Format tab, there's a columns group. And apart from being able to do things like insert a column, if you also click on the column settings drop down, you get some of the field settings that you've just seen and also a quick link to jump to that field settings. And you'll see if I hover over it, there is a shortcut, Alt plus F3. And going back to the right click menu again, you can, for example, change the font. So you can do things like change the text style, change the size, underline, strike through, and change the color if you want to. So lots of different ways that you can change the look and feel of your display or your view that you're seeing. One other thing that you need to be able to do is to hide a column, which is basically doing the opposite of inserting a column. Now, when it says hide column, and again, you can access that from the right click menu, what it actually means is remove it from this table. It doesn't delete any data. It just means that that column of information is no longer shown. So if I was to hide this column, you'll see that I can no longer see it. And if I wanted to, I could insert that again. So we should be used to doing that. And I go back to my list. So if I was looking for finish, I could start to type finish, and it will bring up just the items that match what I've typed. So it's like a little filter almost. But what you'll see is that when I re-add that column back in, I do lose those customizations that I'd applied earlier. So you can see the most obvious one, the text is no longer center aligned. So now for a very quick demonstration related to resources tables. If I go to the resource sheet, we only have one table here, and we don't have any kind of chart on the right. But again, if you want to insert an additional column of resource information here, so let's say you wanted something to the left of the max column, if I right click on that and do insert column, I'm offered a list of resource related columns. So I could choose one of those. So let's just say actual cost for argument's sake. So pretty much everything else works just the same when you're dealing with a resource table. You've even got a column formatting group up here as well. So if you need to, you can go in here and edit the field settings and any of the font, just like we could in the last table. Now finally, let me just jump back to the Gantt chart view and go back to that View tab and go into Table once more. And then I'm going to go to More Tables. Now, if I wanted to create my own custom table, I could definitely do that by clicking on the New button. And that brings up the Table Definitions dialog. So I could go in here and I could give my table a name. And for each field, I can specify alignment, width, title, and so on. And in that way, I can set up a table that serves a particular purpose and possibly combines together exactly the pieces of information that I want to cover in a particular situation. So that can be very, very useful. And one final thing, let's just cancel out of that. Now, if we go back to the drop down underneath tables, now, if I've made lots and lots of changes to tables, so maybe I've added fields, formatted columns, done all sorts of things, you'll see that there's an option down here called Reset to Default, and that will reset the current table back to the default table. So that's it on tables. I will see you in the next section.